Welcome to Wellness Within. This is a three-part podcast dedicated to exploring the deeper dimensions of healing, from intuitive wisdom to dreams and spiritual purpose. I'm Dr. Michelle Greenwell, PhD, CIH of Bioenergetic Wellness, and I'm so grateful to have you with us. Over the next 3 episodes, we're going to dive into how the body, mind, emotions, and spirit weave together to create our lived experience of health, and how we can work with that awareness to create meaningful transformation. Joining me for this powerful trilogy is the extraordinary Dr. Delphine Rossi. Delphine has been in the field of holistic health and healing in the higher education for several decades, pioneering both degree programs and courses in integrative and complementary health. She's worked within community health, mental health, and medical settings. Her early research studies and national presentations focused on the spiritual well-being and holistic health of children kindergarten to 12. While her later research and peer-reviewed articles focused on spiritual well-being and spiritual healing, Dr. Rossi is a licensed ordained minister and has held positions as a director of hospice, hospital chaplain volunteer, and spiritual counselor. Today, we begin with the foundation of wellness, and we're looking at intuition and the biofield. How to listen to the subtle messages of the body, the spirit, and through the energetic system that surrounds and informs us. Welcome, Delphine. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be here with you.
As we begin our episode, what do you have in your cup today?
Today I have water in my cup, and it's a garden cup because I love to play in my wildflower gardens. But I did have tea earlier this morning, Bengal spice.
Ooh, that's a lovely one. And did you do that with water? Or did you add milk to that one?
I add half and half to that one.
Okay,
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful. Today, I'm going to introduce To Be Honest. And this one, I was thinking it's like coming back to an old friend. I haven't had this one for a little while, and I missed it. So I'm enjoying this tea that comes from the Cape Breton Tea Company. And this blend has an affirmation. I'm just going to read it off the package here. The governing meridian is about resonance for calmness and redirecting energy towards true desires. And as we dive into our conversation today, we're going to invite you to think about where you want to go, what you want to experience, and how the topic today is going to influence the decisions that you're going to make moving forward. And as you do that, there is this opportunity, because we're working with the governing meridian, for change to happen and to happen with ease. And going along with it is a little bit of lemon balm, peppermint, strawberry leaves, black currant, blackberry leaves, lemongrass, orange blossom, lavender, heather flower, rose petals, and chamomile. So there's a lovely nurturing blend within that. I'm going to highlight lemongrass and orange blossom so we can bring the energy of those 2 herbs together and their partnership. And they're going to help you as you're listening to this podcast have a healing session and to be able to bring some new ideas forward. So these are botanicals known for their ability to cleanse and uplift the spirit. Lemongrass helps to cut through the energetic clutter, bringing clarity and honesty. And orange blossom opens the heart and fosters a sense of calm courage. And together they support intuitive clarity and resonance in the biofield. And that subtle energy space is what tells the truth, even when we're not ready to say it out loud ourselves. So Delphine, thank you for coming to join me today. And I'm going to say slanche, which is what we say here in Cape Breton. And I've got my bees with my flowers, and you've got your garden. Cheers.
Cheers.
So for those listening to the podcast for the first time, we always talk about the tea and an affirmation first to give you that start to the healing process. And as we're going through the conversation, you'll notice I'll sip at different points through the podcast, and that is to lock in the herbs with some of the conversation that happens. And so sometimes discoveries come through, and I always want to make sure I just solidify that with the tea. So as you're sipping at home, please feel free to add those sips in as it comes to something where you go, I never thought about that, or that's a new idea. And then sip, because that's going to be able to bring it through. All right. Let's dive in. So let's talk about the biofield and how someone might begin to sense or feel it. Can you share that, Delphine?
Sure. Um, the biofield is the energetic field that surrounds and interpenetrates the physical body. It's known by various names in various cultures. For example, some call it the auric field, some call it the subtle body, the human energy field. But it's really a matrix from which the physiology grows and develops. This is the theory, so to speak, of the biofield. Um, so, how to sense the biofield? Well, one of the most important pieces would be to begin to develop a quiet mind, because a mind full of chatter is going to distract from sensing the different energies, the frequencies, vibrations within the biofield, the physical body. So the quiet mind is very important. And to, to really focus on that, one needs to be in their heart space as opposed to their head space, because the heart is more of a feeling space, whereas the head is more intellectual, always more thinking, but you want to be in that quiet heart space. So quiet mind, quiet heart space to really pay attention to the body. And there are a variety of techniques that people use. Um, you could use autogenic training, could use progressive relaxation, body scans, different diaphragmatic breathing exercises, different meditative practices. Um, and one of the most valuable for people that are just starting out to sense the biofield um, is guided imagery. And guided imagery is available on YouTube with a variety of people posting their guided imagery sessions on it. But that really is very, very helpful because it instructs the beginner, so to speak, on how to really focus in and go through the body from head to toe.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about when I'm teaching Tai Chi, uh, when we have that deep breathing happen and the mind has been cleared, then often I'll describe it as sensing the body as being bigger than it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when you have that awareness that goes beyond the skin. And then I'll often say to people, you take your hand over top of your arm, you can likely feel the hairs on your arm, even though you're not touching the arm, but there's
Mm-hmm.
an awareness. And it's always lovely for people to realize they're bigger than they are. I just love the expression on their faces. Some of the different techniques that you said, the very first one, do you remember what you said there?
Autogenic training.
Can you just share what that is?
Sure, that's a technique where one would begin usually at the feet, the toes, and uh, just really, I want to say, in that quiet mind, start focusing toes and foot first with a phrase like my toes are warm, and then maybe repeat it 3, 4 times. My toes are warm, and then maybe add my toes are warm and heavy. and really feeling into that part of the body as one is saying it. And then you would gradually go up. You could go up to the ankles next and repeat the phrases, and then go up into the lower leg, upper leg, etc., up through the body. And um, there are more like traditional phrases like my legs are heavy and warm, but one could also create their own phrases as well in this type of relaxation technique and scanning technique.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about those who have chronic pain. That
Mhm.
must create an instant way for the pain to disappear as they're focused on these other intentions.
It can, yes. Yes, when we're focused on one part of the body, when that focus is there, oftentimes people don't identify with the pain in another part of the body because that's not where their attention is.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, so now we have emotions, thoughts, and stress
Mhm.
patterns that can affect that
Mhm.
biofield. So,
Mhm.
how could somebody notice those kinds of shifts through the day as their emotions and their thoughts change, their mind fills up with stuff and then might release or might not release?
Well, just going back to the idea that everything is interrelated in our physiology, our mind, body, and our spirit. And even in a science view, uh, Dr. Candace Pert's research in psychoneuroimmunology really brought that to the forefront, the psyche, the nervous system, and the immune system, and how they're all very much interrelated, and there's a lot of crosstalk. But now we also know that there's crosstalk across, amongst all organs and cells within the body. And so when there's some type of emotion, stressor, etc., that isn't just something that is in our mind, so to speak, or in our emotions, it's within our physical body. And so when we're in tune with our body, we can actually feel when those stressors are starting to ramp up, so to speak. So it may be that we start to feel a little bit of uh, a pain in our neck or a stiffness in our neck, or we might start to feel like a little bit of a headache. Or if we're going through something that's very emotional, our stomach may really be off, right? People have different ways that their bodies expresses its upset or its uh, stressors, etc. But by tuning into, okay, how does my body feel now? And, like let's say in the morning, right? And then as you go through your day, you're monitoring your body, and you realize, oh, I have this little stiffness in my neck here. Something must be going on, or I'm starting to get a headache. What's happening? And that's really part of self-diagnosis as well. And then, once someone becomes more adept at self-diagnosis, then they can actually do something about the stressor or the emotion that's affecting them in a more negative way that they're taking in, but they're not releasing, so to speak. It's just sort of sitting in there. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about as you use the word self-diagnosis. So that awakening to the idea that yes, it can be a headache, but a headache doesn't mean you just need to go grab the medicine bottle and dull the pain, but
Mhm.
actually start to be aware of that pain and then realize how did it get there or ask the
Mhm.
questions that will lead to that. And I just
Yes.
wanted to bring that forward for everybody listening because that's a different way of looking at it than I'm just going to dull the pain and I don't care how it got there. I'm just going to carry and push through because I've got to get this project done or I have a timeline I'm on. And
Yes.
this backs us up to that mindfulness you opened with.
Yes, very much so. Right. Knowing your body.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So as someone begins to tune in more deeply, they might wonder, how do I know if what I'm sensing is intuition? Maybe it's just mental chatter. Can you talk a little bit about intuition and signals that come through?
Sure. Um, Intuition is our innate companion. It's an innate part of us. We all have intuitive abilities to varying degrees, depending on how much we're open to our intuition and how much we practice it. Uh, Intuition speaks to us in a variety of ways. It speaks to us through the senses, seeing, hearing, taste, touch, smell, um, and of course the extrasensory perceptions as well. Um, Intuition can be thought of as like an inner knowing or a clear knowing or an aha, gut feeling, a hunch, etc. And in order to really begin to trust one's intuition and know that the information that you're getting is accurate, one of the best ways to do that is to keep a journal of your intuitive insights. Because if you're new to this, if you're new to really learning how to enhance your intuitive abilities, you're going to need some kind of record keeping system, so to speak.
Mhm.
And you also really need to be dedicated and consistent with your not only journaling, but with the practice of intuition, like really learning about it. In other words, studying about it, educating oneself, and using different intuitive uh, skills and techniques and practicing them over and over because it is something that does need practice if we're going to get good at it, just like any, most things. So, so the best way, again, just to summarize, is to keep a journal, educate oneself, and so as you go along, you'll see, oh, on this day I had this insight, and gosh, I was correct. Or I had this insight and no, I guess it really wasn't correct because I was tired or I didn't feel very well that day. Um, or it was after I had several drinks, which can also affect our intuitive abilities to some degree. Um, yes, so those are the best ways to really start to enhance and begin to trust one's intuitive senses.
And it's really interesting as you're saying that and thinking about those emotions. We have that bad day, that off day,
Mhm,
how the filter is altered. And
mhm,
I'm just going to say that because a lot of people don't realize that worry. My
mhm,
husband is a Taurus, and so they talk about Tauruses are always worrying, and
mhm,
how that lens just changes everything. But then I didn't think about it in terms of intuition.
mhm.
Yes, it changes the filter of how you say things, decisions you're making. Those are the grounding kind of everyday stuff. But from the subconscious piece, what happens to your intuition and how it goes askew.
Yes, yes, and it can also go askew with wishful thinking. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, someone wants something so much that they keep projecting it out, and then they think the intuition or intuitive hits are coming back, but it's really the wishful thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Intuition is really pretty quiet most of the time. I shouldn't say all the time because sometimes it's not. Sometimes it'll really, you know, be very loud, in particular if it's something that your higher self wants you to know immediately. It can be very loud, but for the most part, it's rather quiet and more subtle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I,
We can
I've,
also, and I want to mention this too, we can also get intuitive hits from the environment.
mm-hmm.
And particularly if we've, asked a question and we're looking for insights. The environment can provide us with intuitive hints or answers. It could be a flock of birds or a certain color bird or an animal that's in your yard or a flower that hasn't bloomed and all of a sudden it's blooming. I mean, there are different ways that the universe does send us information, and it can be environmentally.
I remember practicing the intuition piece. This is a while back while I was teaching dance, and it was like February. And I was like, how am I going to know that I'm on the right path for this decision? And I thought, when I see a butterfly, that's how I'll know. And then as I was going to teach dance that afternoon, the girls started to arrive for dance class, and they didn't have to wear bodysuit and tights. It was very recreational. And the first person through had a giant butterfly on her shirt. And then the next one came through and she had lots of butterflies all over her shirt. I was like, okay, I got the message.
That's wonderful. Yes. Great example. Yeah.
And we don't think about those little things, but they do so make a difference.
Mhm.
When you ask for a cue or a way to know. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think we're looking for everything. So it's like,
Mhm.
plus the kitchen sink, then it's hard to trust it because you're not sure if it's just there or not there. And then that doubt thing comes into the mind where we just question everything. But if you're just really certain about things and then set it up so that you can be successful with your intuition. That's just my experience of coming through and developing, um, and also thinking about when I first started doing this work. I was like, oh, other people have that. They were born with it. So, I won't have that. And not realizing that when you set your mind to focus on it, then you also have the ability. You might have been born with it, not had to work so hard, and other people might have to work a little bit more and practice a little bit more. But we all have that ability.
Yes.
On the
Mhm.
list. Yeah. Now, the next part we wanted to talk about was timelines of life experiences, physically,
Mhm.
emotionally, and spiritually. Can you dive into that now?
Sure. I teach a course called Spiritual Contracts, and in that course, um, I have an assignment in which students create timelines of their life experiences from birth until their current age. And so they'll create one timeline of uh, physical events that have occurred in their life. And this would encompass like illness, accidents, injuries, etc., surgeries, etc. And then they draw a second timeline, separate timeline of emotional events that have occurred in their life, those events that they would consider um, really joyful or really challenging and difficult. So the whole range, again, from uh, birth until their current age. And they just map those out literally on a timeline at age 4, at age 7, at age 10. This is what happened to me. And this is how I felt, of course, for the timeline, the emotions. And then they create a third timeline, spiritual health timeline. Um, and the spiritual health timeline would include items, for example, when one felt incredible joy, or one felt incredible love, or could be the opposite. One had a loss and they are grieving that loss of love and meaning, or they have had a loss of faith, loss of trust, anything relating to the spiritual aspects of themselves. And then taking those three timelines, they overlay them on each other. And then with their intuitive abilities, they can discern the interconnections between what's going on in their physical life, their emotional, mental life, and their spiritual life, and how it's so all very interrelated. And they can discover patterns that are going on. Um, but the bottom line, the goal is to identify these interrelationships and then to create a plan of how they're going to heal those aspects of these interrelationships that have not been healed to the present time.
Wow, that is a deep dive.
It's a deep dive, and from these students that have taken this course with me, and there have been many, it is a very, very transformational kind of process for them, that real deep inner insights into um, their holistic self, so to speak. Yes.
I love that phrase, holistic self, because I don't think we ever think of ourselves that way. We have self-care, we have
Mhm.
self-empowerment. Um, but yeah, wow, to think about that holistically. Holistically, who are we in that health realm?
Mhm. Yes.
Um, and
And
as
so,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just thinking about how Carolyn Mace had used the phrase that that one's biography is reflected in one's biology, and this process really does address that.
Hmm. And I'm thinking about how many people who have a symptom that shows up
Mhm,
and they ignore it and they
mhm,
carry on or they push through it. And then
mhm,
another symptom shows up. I'm not speaking from experience at all. I'm saying that very facetiously. um, but that it continues to build and build and build. And so
mhm,
then by the time they go to seek medical advice, it's a very complicated web of
mhm,
emotional baggage that has led to all the physical structural challenges.
mhm,
And then we're asking the poor medical model to try to unwind that,
mhm.
try to figure it out.
Yes,
And
yes.
and it's not easy, and especially if your ailment that you come in for is a sore shoulder, and it's got a timeline that goes back to birth, when you might have had a birthing challenge and they pulled
Mm,
on the shoulder. Like it could go back that
mm,
far, but for the medical model to have the time and space to be able to figure that out is very difficult.
mhm,
But look at how simple it is for someone to stop and look at their life and figure out what are those key pieces in it that have really defined who they are or
mhm.
created who they are in a
Yes,
holistic way.
yes.
And and as I'm saying that, I'm also thinking about in a holistic way, a lot of times we don't think of ourselves that way either. So we're thinking about, oh, I've had this experience and that experience, and I've traveled this place in the world and that place. I've met these kinds of people, but we never actually stop and go, what was that holistic experience like?
Mhm,
Um, so I'm just inviting everybody to think a little bit differently about what they're doing. And I'm so grateful, Delphine, that you shared that tool, because the opportunity for people to sit down and go, let me see what I could come up with. Let me see how I could
mhm,
define that. And if I really enjoy this, there's an actual course that I can go and study and dive deep into that and be supported in the process of
mhm.
unwinding those stories. Yeah.
Yes. And that reminds me, Michelle, about uh, a scale that Penny Pierce, who writes about frequency and intuition and sensing the biofield, etc., created. And she calls it the "How soon do you know" scale. And it starts with just like vibrations that we might feel that are a little bit off or that are trying to tell us something, subtle energies, right? And then what happens when we ignore that first sign? And then it goes down a scale, as you mentioned, to, people still continue to ignore all the little signs that the body is trying to give them that, hey, something's not right physically, mentally, emotionally, right, all together.
Mhm.
And then it can lead to, okay, well, now it's, gone down 5 or 6 steps, and now I'm really not feeling well. And then it gets to, okay, now I have a disorder, right? So to speak, disorder. And in other words, it can go right down into illness and disease. But it's that idea of, again, getting back to knowing your body, to really paying attention, not being in your head all the time, being in your heart space, right? To really be aware of what's going on in your physical body
Mhm.
and how it all interrelates, how your emotions and your spirit are all interrelated to that.
I love that scale because that's not talked about. Um, that's amazing. And
Mhm.
then to think about um, too for people, I just don't know how I got here. Like I can't understand how I put my back out. And then to
Mm,
be able to look at those pieces in the weeks previous, months
mhm,
previous, and just work themselves back and then start to ask the question, why was I ignoring it? How is it serving me to ignore those cues?
mhm,
And what does that mean? Am
mhm.
I am I
Yes.
seeking more attention by ignoring myself?
Mm,
I want other people to notice me because I'm not noticing me.
mm.
And how can we do that? Yeah. Wow. Okay. So now you have archetype charts and how they influence our understanding of intuition. You want to tell us a bit about this?
Sure. In this course that I teach in spiritual contracts, a third section of it is to cast a natal archetype chart. And let me go back a little bit and share, well, how did I even get into all this, right? How did all this happen? Um, when I was a graduate student at Holos Graduate Seminary, Dr. Norm Shealy was one of my professors and very much a mentor of mine. And he is very well known for his work in holistic medicine and holistic healing. And he had written several books. One, though, was the Science of Medical Intuition, which is actually a booklet and a CD series. And he had this as part of his course, Spiritual Contracts. And when I graduated, I was invited by Dr. Seeley to be a professor at the school. And an interim provost. And so that was the first class that I was given because he was retiring from teaching and he wanted me to teach it. And so that's how I got into teaching this area. Although I had taken the course with him, um, that's how I actually got into really becoming very involved in teaching it. And so this third section is on the archetypes. And archetypes are images, primordial images, identities that are from the collective unconscious, or that's what the philosophy is. In other words, they're just part of human experience, right? All the different kinds of archetypes, or what we could call identities. And the idea of casting an archetype chart is to look at the identities which we have mostly embraced over our lifetime to where we are today. And so there are, and with Dr. Carolyn Mace's work, of whom Dr. Shealy collaborated, and she and she and Norm were very much teaching together for a while and doing some research. But anyway, the idea of the 12 natal archetypes comes primarily, I think, from Dr. Mace. And so there are four primary: child, victim, prostitute, and saboteur that she posits that everybody has. And then there are eight that people would have to select from the many, many types of identities that are out there. So which ones have you mostly been throughout your life? And then once you collect those 12, then you have a card deck, you cast your wheel, meaning your cards, and each archetype lands in a certain house within that wheel. And each house represents something, right? Some aspect of life. And so by doing that, you can really see how that identity played out within that aspect of life. It could be life values, it could be life relationships, it could be relationship to the world, etc., family. And by doing that, you can see how not only your identity is played out, but also how it's danced, so to speak, or had relationships with the other identities that you've assumed in this lifetime. But it gives you some really deep insights when you combine it with your timeline, right, of what's happened to you. You can sort of see perhaps what identities were prominent when you had this happened, or when you had this happened at age 20, or when you had this accident at age 27, or when there was something wonderful, you got a great new job at age 30. In other words, you can really intuit how these archetypes went along with or played a big role in how your life has manifest over time.
Wow.
There's a lot here. There's just so much. I mean, you could have a talk just on archetypes. And of course, there are different viewpoints about archetypes too, just so your listeners are aware. There are very, different schools of thought, and different writers write a little bit differently about archetypes. This is just one,
Mm-hmm.
this is a way, in other words, to look at them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about the waiting list for people for mental health who are
Mm,
trying to find a counselor that they can speak with.
mhm,
And what would it be to be able to go into these kinds of pieces on your own and start to understand those layers,
mhm.
um, which is empowerment rather than waiting for that appointment to finally arrive for somebody to save you, to help you out.
Yes.
But to be able to stop and have the conversations with yourself about, let's look at what this has been like, and what role have I played, and have I played the role of a victim, or have I played the role of someone empowered?
Mhm.
In what way have I been a superhero because of the skills I've grown? There's just so many ways to be able to play with this that doesn't require waiting for somebody. Um, they can get
Yes.
started. And,
Yes.
and then I want to lead that into something you and I talked about before we hit the record button today, which is when we're studying all of these topics and we take a course, the course isn't just content. The course is real and transformative. Do you want to maybe describe a little bit what you've experienced with your students over time?
Sure. As I said, like this work is very experiential. Yes, there is some reading and studying, but much of it has to do with the self. In other words, you're again self-diagnosing, right? You're really looking at yourself, and you're self-exploring here, the different aspects of who you are, and you're getting really familiar with those deep inner aspects of the self. And it's very insightful. It's very enlightening. It often is very transformative, because you have these huge insights that you hadn't had previously, so that you can discontinue patterns, and you can also take what you've learned, and if something hasn't been healed, for example, I mentioned, that's part of the last piece is the plan. Well, how are you going to heal these aspects of yourself? And so students actually create a plan for healing those aspects that have not been healed, once they have these big insights into themselves, into their mind body behaviors, so to speak. So I would just say in general, like with students, it's just been really incredibly insightful, very uh, deeply transforming for them to discover these much deeper aspects of themselves.
Yeah. I love I love that whole approach of the opportunity to change it and make a plan.
Mhm.
Because so often we're waiting for someone else to tell us how many other appointments we might have to attend,
Mhm.
how we're going to have to schedule some things in, or even some of them I'm thinking, even in the holistic, these things take time, right? And I'm thinking about, well, if you make a plan and you say, I'm going to look and dive into when I did have that accident when I was 7, and I'm going to look into how did that change my trajectory and how did it change the way people around me spoke to me and
Mhm.
the way that I started to respond to people or bought into my injury and held on to it because I got extra ice cream.
Mhm.
Mom and
Mhm.
dad paid more attention to me at that time. And then how has that served me now? And so to be
Mhm.
able to really have that, which doesn't require necessarily a conversation with someone to talk about all those pieces, but to just sit and be reflective with them. And yeah. And again, back
Yes.
to that wholesome.
Yes, and I want to mention, because it ties into what you're saying right now, Michelle, is that archetypes are considered neutral identities until their light or shadow side is triggered by something. And the light side of the archetype or identity is self-empowered, empowerment, really positive, right? Lots of positive qualities. The shadow side is more the side of the archetype or the identity where there has been something that's usually happened by surprise. It takes the person by surprise, and they don't know how to really deal with it at the time. And so they develop a means of survival for the experience. And oftentimes, the shadow side includes like fears from an originating event, as well as repressed feelings about what happened, just like you were giving that example. Um, and so, in this process of looking at the archetypes, both light and shadow sides are also identified according to the timeline as well, which again opens up a whole new aha, of self-discovery for people so that they can heal.
Right. And then
Yeah.
it takes us back to the filter that if something locked in when you were 7 and
Mhm.
it was I need to be taken care of, maybe as the idea, and then
Mhm.
how that lens continued to be the lens of how you approached everything and the
Mhm.
relationships you had or the relationships you have with older people. Um,
Yes.
yeah. And how has it served you?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Um, so if we take the archetype awareness
Mhm.
and we go to the insights into those spiritual contracts, um, can you explain a little bit more about the existential perspective that comes out?
Sure. Existential meaning that that there isn't necessarily a objective meaning to what's happening. We, as a unique human being, we decide what meaning and purpose is to our personal life events. So we're going to uh, we are going to be the creators of that meaning and purpose. And so by combining all this information from our biofield and the scanning that we do of it and understanding a little bit more of it, to the timelines, to all the archetype information, we can put all that together, and intuitively it's possible for us to discern what types of spiritual contracts or spiritual agreements that we have coming into this lifetime, like spiritual purposes. And again, it's a very in-depth process, and it really is quite intuitive as well. So that's why all along the way, one is really using their intuitive abilities to identify more and more of what's going on within the self and how that's manifest in the world.
I'm thinking about conversations I've had with people who just can't find their life purpose. And
Mm.
they just, it's an elusive thing. And they keep thinking, I don't know if I'm following my life's purpose. I'm stressed out because I can't figure out why I'm supposed to be here. What am I supposed to be doing? But with what you've presented today, it's about being able to look at all of the pieces and then seeing what's really presented itself, what's been there. And that lights up where that purpose is, rather than you trying to go out and find that piece. It's actually already sitting there if we take the time.
Yes, already inside of us. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So as people are listening and they're thinking about maybe that's something elusive for them, they have been thinking, I don't know if I'm following my purpose, or I need to make some changes. I don't know what they are. Then this opportunity to really look within. And it's bigger than that mindfulness, or we need to just be calm and have deep breathing. It's beyond that piece. It's we need to have that every day. We need to be able to bring ourselves back to our center, but then we also need to be curious about how we want to dive into that space now that we're sitting in it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. You've given us some really great examples to be able to play with. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that could help people get started with their first dive into the energy field and intuition?
I would just say again, practice, right? Practice, practice. It really, really does make a difference. Practice intuitive skills, learn about intuition, get some books. There's some great books out there that have lots of different exercises and activities you can practice with, and then keep that journal. Um, quiet mind, right? For really not only sensing your biofield, but what's going on in the world around you energetically. Because there's so much going on. There is so much going on at a subtle level that people will miss if they're not in a quiet mind. Yeah. And also, I guess one of the last things I would say is self-honesty. To truly heal, one has to be 100% self-honest. And so going through these activities, in particular the timelines and the archetypes, even though you may find something that is a bit difficult for you to um, accept, nonetheless, it's going to be really important to be 100% self-honest so that you can um, accept and then have a plan. Okay, well then how can I change this? How can I heal from this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of the plan rather than willpower. or I need to change that habit, or this is my habit, so I'm just going to keep it. But that opportunity to make a plan where you can see how the outcome is possible. You can see what's on the other side. You can see the reason you would want to transform. Because I think that's, people miss that sometimes, the
Mhm.
reason behind why they want to do something.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking
Yes,
about people. Sorry, go ahead.
because transformation is empowering.
Hmm.
Yes, like you had mentioned that word before as well. But yes, it's very empowering to transform yourself.
Hmm.
But that can be scary for people too,
Yeah.
right? That kind of self-transformation, that change alone can sometimes be intimidating to people, or it can create fears in them to change, because that may mean that many other things in their life would have to change too.
Hmm. Yes. And I have had experiences with clients that, one, they didn't want to change, everybody else should change because there's nothing wrong with them. And then to the other side of, if I change, will people still accept me? And
Mhm.
then that idea of
Mhm.
being rejected. And then that holds back people from even wanting to dive into anything. Um, but the richness of knowing, I'm not sure if I've got the words right from what you said because you were succinct, but of finding that true self within,
Mhm.
um, is empowering, but it's also kind of our birthright,
Mhm.
of why we're here and our opportunity to be who we want to be, um, rather than meeting the expectations of those who've gathered around us so far.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. All right. Lots for people to think about. I had one other little thought because I was thinking, this is a silly little one, but I get it a lot, especially when I'm at the markets with the tea, because I have a lot of people who say, oh, I just drink coffee. And then they just don't want to have a conversation with me about tea because they only drink coffee. And that's kind of the same thing, just on a smaller scale, of that willingness to change or to think about something a little bit differently, or that it's okay. You could have your coffee, but you can drink tea as well. And maybe you always have coffee first thing in the morning because you like that caffeine fix, but maybe you don't even need the caffeine fix, and maybe caffeine might be better at noon, and maybe the body wants something a little bit more subtle first thing in the morning. So I'm just suggesting those things because it's a great hands-on piece at the way that people respond to me with the tea, and I think a little bit differently about how to use the tea with the intentions, the relationship of the herbs, and I've had people come in too that they just want one ingredient. I really like the flavor of that one ingredient. That's all I want. And when you say, well, you could have a smorgasbord of flavors if you wanted, and they say, no, I just want one flavor. That's it. So as people are listening and thinking, I'm just bringing those examples forward because I find it interesting how people respond and where they're stuck or where they want to hold on, um, and what would happen if they let go. What would happen if they decided to put two ingredients together or 10.
How daring, right?
And my
Very
family would say, and then mom's going to say, and get rid of that coffee habit. It's the ongoing, this is a joke within our family because my husband and I don't drink coffee. And so my children, my son loves coffee. And so it's the ongoing joke about the two. But it just does create a great way for people to think about choices they make, maybe the food that's on the plate. They always have the same breakfast every day. What is that? What is that doing and serving? And then how might those choices have come from this beautiful timeline you've illustrated and the archetypes that are
Mhm.
available? Yeah. Well, Delphine, thank you for a great opening conversation. And I look forward to part two as it comes up. So thank you.
And thank you, Michelle. I look forward to the second one as well.
Today, we've touched into the sacred subtlety of the human energy field and how listening to it can return us to clarity, authenticity, and calmness. I invite everyone to reflect on the affirmation today, which is the governing meridian is about resonance for calmness and redirecting energy towards true desires. And it's really about the changes that we can make and how we can approach everything. Where might your energy be asking for redirection? What truth is waiting in your biofield to be felt? And next time, we'll be continuing our journey with dreamscapes and soul whispers, where we'll explore the healing messages within our dreams. Be sure to join us, and I'm going to be brewing a cup of tea called 1713 Spring Tea in Lewisburg. Bring in some history. So until then, take a breath, trust your inner wisdom, and stay well. Take care, everyone.